Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. Now, heavy rains have lashed parts of earthquake-hit Myanmar, complicating relief efforts and raising the risk of disease. The death toll from the 7.7 magnitude earthquake that shook the country on the 28th of March has surpassed 3,000. It is one of Myanmar's strongest in a century, jolting a region home to 28 million people, toppling buildings such as hospitals, flattening communities, and leaving many without food, water, and shelter. This does come amid a complex political backdrop, with the military struggling to run Myanmar since its return to power in a 2021 coup that unseated the elected civilian government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. The generals have been internationally isolated since the takeover, and Myanmar's economy and basic services, including healthcare, have been reduced to tatters amid an outbreak of civil war. Now, to talk more about the relief efforts that are underway in Myanmar, we're joined by Benjamin William. He's the Secretary General of the Singapore Red Cross. Good morning, Benjamin, once again.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on to talk about this pressing issue. First and foremost, Benjamin, could you give us an update on the ground situation that you're hearing about from the Red Cross teams and affiliates that are currently there right now?
So the situation remains very dire. The death toll has reached about 3,005 confirmed. And we expect actually the death toll to rise even further considerably. Access to many parts of the earthquake-hit areas are still very limited, both due to physical impediments like collapsed bridges and all that, as well as the ongoing conflict. So this is really a disaster on top of a political crisis, on top of a humanitarian crisis. Even before the earthquake, many of the households and all that were suffering from a lack of basic necessities, including power. So now the situation has been exacerbated. The situation on the ground is such that even basic needs are limited. So the priority is really food, water, shelter, but also health. Many of the hospitals have collapsed or are unsafe for patients. So medical teams are out on the ground serving the injured, but there's a lack of medical supplies. So on top of this, as you earlier said, the monsoon season is coming a bit unseasonably, and the heavy rains have started. But you would think that heavy rains lower the temperature, but the temperatures are up. They are expecting temperatures of be above 37 degrees in the next couple of days. So the situation is really bad.
Yeah, I want to talk about the golden period, right? This is the first 48 to 72 hours after such a disaster. Now, we've obviously passed that phase. So given that has now passed us, can you share some insights into some of the immediate relief efforts that are underway, particularly with regards to providing medical assistance, emergency shelter to the displaced populations? How critical are those interventions, given that the golden period has now passed us?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the possibility of finding people alive in the rubble is very low. So the focus now is on trying to save those who have been injured. So medical is one of the big priorities. The Red Cross has several medical teams on the ground. They are the biggest provider of medical support. Working with the Myanmar Red Cross, they have also sent out advanced first aid kits, which means it's slightly more comprehensive than the normal first aid kits to try and get those who have been injured to be treated. But right now, the dire need is additional medical supplies. There are several medical teams, and including foreign medical teams on the ground, but I think medical supplies are short supply. Secondly is the basic needs. Food, water. It's raining, but potable water is still rare. So one of our priorities is to get potable water to the displaced communities. You talked about the displaced communities. We should not forget that even before the earthquake, there were about 1.6 million displaced persons in that region, which has been hit by the earthquake due to the conflict. So the need is also for them to have shelter. I just read the report from Myanmar that the heavy rains have actually wiped out some of the tents that the displaced people were living in, and all their personal items and all that have been drenched. And this is expected in the next few days. So shelter is another urgent need.
Yeah, it's a confluence of factors that appear to be impeding relief efforts, but you're doing the best that you can. Now, I'm just curious to know how you strike a balance between short-term emergency aid and long-term rebuilding and resilience, especially in a place, as you've described, like Myanmar, with such heavy political instability.
So in a crisis like this, and I think this is a crisis that is something that is even worse than most crises that we face because it's multiple, complex. I think the priority must be immediate. If you can't save the people immediately, then the recovery is far away. So the priority for most of our humanitarian efforts now is to save the people. But that does not mean we don't have in mind the recovery process. So immediately after this relief phase, in the next few days, you'll be moving into the recovery phase. In the recovery phase, we'll be focusing on whether we can move people into a slightly more permanent shelter, more predictable water supply and food supply. And then we come to the rebuilding phase. For the Singapore Red Cross, depending on the funds that we raise, we do keep aside some of the funds for rebuilding and recovery. You see, in most disasters like this, unfortunately, in the first 3 or 4 weeks, you have an inflow of all sorts of humanitarian actors.
That's right.
And then after that, they leave. And then the real work of recovery starts. So the Singapore Red Cross has made it a point to be there even in the recovery phase.
Yeah, to your point, I was just going to talk about that. In the last week, we've seen the international community come together to provide assistance to Myanmar, but there are always concerns about the sustainability of such aid efforts. So what do you think can be done in this case to ensure that the help provided is not just a short-term solution, but also contributes to long-term recovery and resilience? Because when headlines fade, support often dwindles. So what's one thing you wish people understood about the long road to recovery after a disaster like this one?
Yeah. So, the first relief phase in a major disaster like this, maybe it's about 10-15%. The 80 to 90% of the resources are needed for the recovery phase. And that is where we struggle. And the struggle for humanitarian actors has worsened because of the number of crises going on in the world. Gaza, in Ukraine. And a lot of the funds are now diverted to these crises. Unfortunately, once a disaster falls off the main pages, people don't come forward to support it, often due to ignorance, the problem is solved. So my call out to people is to keep track of what's happening in Myanmar. It's in our neighborhood. If possible, continue to support us. This is going to be a long haul. I suspect even the relief phase is going to take a couple of months. And after that, the recovery phase will take 2 to 5 years. So continue to support the humanitarian efforts there.
Yeah, we've also heard reports, Benjamin, that Singapore-developed cyborg cockroaches are being explored to support search and rescue missions. Are these kinds of technologies actually in play in Myanmar right now? And how can tech innovation help in future disaster zones? Because I do understand this is the first time in the world that such cyborgs have been used in a humanitarian operation.
Well, surprisingly, this is the first time.
Yeah.
You would think that this sort of technology would already have been deployed. I saw the cockroaches work. The SCDF showed it to me a few months ago. I think it's a great step forward. Technology is the way to go, I feel. I feel that not enough investment is made into humanitarian work as opposed to all sorts of other things. We spend millions and billions on learning how to kill each other better, but so little on how to save each other.
Very well said.
So I think we need to put more investment into technology. Singapore Red Cross actually champions this. We have introduced drone technology even to our youth program. Drone technology will become more and more important. I mean, you've seen it in the Ukraine war, but I think even in humanitarian efforts, like in this case of access to disaster sites, it's such a vast space. A drone will help us to know where you can reach the people, where the needs are.
Yeah, sometimes people feel like donating isn't enough. Are there other ways that Singaporeans can engage or contribute beyond merely funds?
Okay, so I think funds are important for humanitarian actors so that we can do what we need to do. But I think more and more, it is important that we realize that we are part of a global community, that we should be there for humanity. So for those of us who can, we should volunteer. But you cannot volunteer just when the disaster happens. You have to volunteer earlier so that you're trained, you're
Correct.
able to contribute when a disaster happens.
You know the lay of the land.
Exactly.
Right?
Even something simple as first aid. One of the major things that's going to happen secondary is the trauma. So I suspect Singapore Red Cross will also be involved in providing psychological first aid and psychosocial support to the earthquake victims. So people can come forward to learn psychological first aid, how to deal with people going through trauma. I think what is important is that we are aware that we have to play our part. I mean, in Singapore, we have the elderly, we have the need for blood donors.
Yes.
All this helps to instill in the minds of people that we are all part of humanity. We need to play a part in it.
Fantastic stuff. Well, you guys are doing a great job. We commend you and we support you in your relief efforts in Myanmar amid a very terse political climate. Thank you for sharing all that you've done so far, Benjamin.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. That was Benjamin Williams, Secretary General of the Singapore Red Cross. Stay with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.